Okay, that's more like it. Longer than 2 seconds.
Okay. So normally I have a whiteboard. Technically we have a whiteboard, but it was an awkward angle, so I decided to forego with a whiteboard today.
Especially because today's lesson is a little bit shorter since I realized that it's summertime. You guys probably don't want any more school, even if it's about something you enjoy. So I decided to keep this one nice and short. First off, for anyone who entered in um, the last contest, we are tallying up the results now, and those will be announced, I believe, in the next 2 weeks. If you have the form for that, it has on the other side when it will be. So as long as you didn't turn in the whole form and you turned in the half a form, you should have it. If you don't, that's okay. I know when it is, so we're good. As for the next contest, the summer contest is coming up very fast. Today, actually, I printed off all the stuff and put them upstairs. Um, and that one, the prompt is write a story, can be any genre, no genre restriction this time, that involves an artist, can be any kind of artist, dancer, musician, painter, whatever you want, who discovers something new about their world. Now, it can be realistic fiction and they just discover something new, like, hey, my best friend is secretly into art too, and I didn't know. Or it can be something very drastic, like when I draw a dragon, a real dragon attacks the town, or something. Whatever you want, as long as it's an artist discovering something new about their art and themselves and the world around them. All right. Moving forward, today's lesson is going to be the top 10 things that make your characters more relatable. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about is actually kind of an interesting one. You can look it up on YouTube. It's a very fascinating video, but um, Spider-Man. Probably have all heard of Spider-Man, right? Pretty popular superhero, even if you don't like him. Stan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man, was told by multiple people that the reason that Spider-Man was going to fail was not only because people didn't like spiders, but because no one could relate to a high schooler. Incorrect. Everyone has been through high school for the most part, and even if they haven't been through traditional high school and they've been homeschooled, they still know what high school is like. It's a pain, right? And so, with that, different experiences that people have most likely been through can actually really help to make your character more relatable. Because someone's like, oh, yeah, I've totally been there where I had like a homework assignment due, but my friends invited me over and now I'm stuck and I either have to choose to not do the homework assignment, now my parents mad at me, or I have to do the homework and be lame and not go to the party, whatever. That's relatable, right? Most people have been through that. And even if they haven't been through that, they've been through some form of schooling, whether traditional or not traditional, that they can relate to those kind of experiences. The next thing that is something that can make a character relatable is going through something difficult. Now, it doesn't have to be super difficult, but it can be. A lot of people have dealt with things like poverty and not being able to afford things. A lot of people have been through bad situations, whether it's like your house it has no working AC in the summer, or it's a leaky roof or something like that. Even if someone hasn't experienced that specifically, they've experienced their house having problems maybe, or they've experienced something like abuse, something difficult. We all go through difficult times in our lives, right? And even if we haven't gone through that, we can have empathy for that scenario because we can imagine going through that scenario, right? And imagine how hard that would be. And that makes it so that when we see this character going through this difficult, hard thing, we can go, oh my gosh, I feel for them. I like this person. They're more interesting. All right. The next thing is being an underdog. The person that you root for because no one expects them to win. They, in fact, all say, like, you're probably going to lose. That sucks for them, but the reason we cheer for them is because of the fact that we see ourselves in them. We've all been there where it's like, I kind of suck at this, but I want to get better at it. And so cheering for the underdog is absolutely something that can help make your characters more relatable, because we've all been there where we're struggling and floundering and we're like, we want to be good at this thing, but we are in the new beginner stage and we're not good at it yet. And that's okay. We all learn. It's also really extra enhances the relatability factor because you get to see a lot of their trial and error. You get to see them fail 1,000 times and keep getting back up, and you're like, hey, you know what? If he can keep getting back up, so can I. It's inspiring, right? All right. Fourth thing, emotional struggles. Generally, unless you're a sociopath, you have emotional struggles. You'll have a moment where you're like, I'm really jealous of my older sister because she's really popular. Or I'm really jealous of my friend because she got on the soccer team and I didn't, or something like that. Those are emotional struggles. Those are things that we uh, feel deeply about and that we can relate to. We've all had a moment where we're jealous or where we wish we'd done better or where we, have to choose between being a good friend and being an honest person. Like if your friend's like, "Hey, I stole that candy bar. Don't tell anyone," right? You're like, "Ah, does it make me a bad friend to tell someone?" You know? Those emotional struggles are hard, but they're part of life. You have moral quandaries and difficulties and struggles. Next thing, number 5, is having flaws. And when I say flaws, I don't just mean like she wears sweaters in the summertime for some reason. Like, that's not really a flaw. That's just odd. Now, if she wears sweaters in the summertime because of the fact that she wants to cover bruises on her arms because she's being abused, now that's something where you're like, okay, that gives her more character depth. That's more interesting. But that's also not really a flaw. What I'm talking about with flaws is things like with the friend scenario. Say your friend stole a candy bar and you're like, now do I choose being a good friend or do I go tell the person that they stole from them? And then you might actually choose not to do the right thing and not tell the person that they stole something. And as a result, that's a flaw. Believing that your friends are more important than any moral thing. That's a flaw. And it's important that our characters have those flaws because otherwise they become fantasy beings. They're not really real. We can't really relate to someone who doesn't have flaws. We all have problems, right? Even if they're good problems, like I'm so loyal to my family that I will forego going to this really cool thing that was really important to me. Like, is that is that bad? Not necessarily. Is it sad and difficult? Yeah, it is. And so you can have flaws that are good flaws too. They don't necessarily have to be like, I have flaws because I'm a thief. Like, they can be things that are just like, I'm really loyal to my family or I'm really loyal to my friends, even to a point that's unhealthy. There is such a thing as having too much of a good thing. It's kind of like vitamins. They'll even tell people, like, don't just down a bottle of vitamin supplements because you'll feel horrible. And it's the same thing here. You can't have too much of a good thing, and that can become a flaw. All right, number 6, internal conflict. Now, the reason this is different from emotional struggles is because emotional struggles are typically things that we're just like, ugh, that makes me uncomfortable. But internal conflict is when we actually are like, for example, we don't tell them about the stolen candy bar. And then for the next few weeks, it's eating us up inside. Now, that's internal conflict because of the emotional struggle. They are two separate entities. One is, I hate that I made that decision, and the other is, I don't know what decision I should make. That's a difficult decision. One is prior and one is post. Internal conflict can also be very interesting because a lot of us have internal conflict where we'll be like, oh, do we tell so and so that they cheated or do we just let my friend be happy? Or, oh, do we just um, allow ourselves to not get the credit that we deserve or do we tell the teacher that so and so cheated? You know, there's a lot of things that can cause internal conflict, or even the most classic dramatic one that you've probably read about by now, the love triangle. The internal conflict of Gail or Peta. Anyway, whatever. I think the choice is obvious, but um, with that, you can have internal conflict where you're like, hey, I like them both. They're both great people, but lean more towards one or the other. Feel free to come sit down. um, the next thing that can make characters more relatable is growth. It's incredibly important that your character experiences growth. If your character is just bad at the beginning and still bad at the end, they're boring. They're the flat classic 2000s villain that goes, hey, hey, and rubs their hands together, and we're all like, oh no, he stole something else. That's boring, right? But if we see a villain like, for example, Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where he goes from being a bad person to actually a really great person, then we're like, okay, this is interesting. They become a dynamic person. They feel like a real person because real people have growth, whether it's for the worse or for the better. And that's why it's also interesting to see people become villains, right? Where they're like, they start out as best friends. That can also be very interesting because that growth inspires us in all sorts of different ways to look at ourselves and the way that we've grown or the ways we haven't grown. Next, number 8, of making your character relatable. Give them a solid backstory. Don't just say, Clara loves solving puzzles. Well, why? Give us a reason. Oh, it's okay. Sneak in. Sneak in. I know it's a weird day today. We're in a weird spot. Um, so give your characters a solid backstory. So, for example, with the character I made up, Clara, let's say Clara loves puzzles, but the reason why she loves puzzles is because her dad really loved puzzles, and her dad passed away when she was really little. So every time she does a puzzle, she feels like she's connecting. That makes it a much more interesting backstory, right? Would you rather read about Clara A, who just loves puzzles for no apparent reason, or Clara B, who loves puzzles because her dad passed away and has a tragic backstory? I'm assuming B. More interesting character, right? um, Part of giving them a solid backstory can just be as simple as that. You don't have to make a super complex backstory in order to make them likable. Some people think you need to like info dump for 2 pages and be like, and her father died of this exact disease on this exact day in this exact way. And it's like, no, you can just sum it up as it makes her happy to make puzzles because it reminds her of her dad who is dead. Duh. You don't need to get super in depth and complicated. I think a lot of people assume that the longer the backstory is, the more solid it is. That's not necessarily true. You can have one sentence backstories. I've given this example before, but I think it's worth repeating because we have a few new people who have not heard this example. There was a TV show I was watching recently, and this girl was ranting and raving at these guys for cutting down the forest, and they were all just like, "Look, lady, we're doing our jobs." And then she storms off, and the guy looks over at her and is like, "That lady's crazy," and he's like, "There's a reason we're separated," and it's like, oh, okay. We just learned everything about them in one sentence, right? That's where it's like, okay, so she's an eco-friendly person and he is a logger, and they somehow ended up getting married, but now they're, falling out. They're separated. And they'd like to still be together, but they're just two different people, you know? That's it tells all of that in one sentence. You don't have to go on for pages and pages to build a solid backstory. That's a solid backstory right there. It took one paragraph or less. All right. Next thing that makes a character relatable: avoiding stereotypes and perfect people. Now, we already talked about having flaws being important, but it really is important that you avoid having a perfect person. Do we all want to be that perfect person? Of course we do, but no one is. That's why it's annoying when you read about a perfect person, because you're like, I don't relate to you. You're not possible. You're not feasible. You can't exist. Now, if they're a robot or an elf or something like that, then okay, I guess I can understand that. But even elves have their flaws, right? They're all like, oh, I'm so flawless. And therefore, ego much. So you can still have flaws even when you're flawless. Or like an android. An android might be flawless, but then have a moment in their programming where they're like, if I don't want to do this anymore, that's a flaw. um, but also avoiding stereotypes. If you just have the villain be the classic, like, oh my gosh, button, like cheerleader type, that's annoying, right? No, none of us like that anymore. We're done. Like, if you want your person to be interesting, you got to make your villains and your main characters be imperfect and not follow stereotypes. You got to make sure they're more than a stereotype. You can have stereotypes, like if you want to have them be the prissy pink cheerleader, that's fine. But you got to make sure that they have more to them than just pink, prissy, and cheerleader. If I can describe your character in 3 words or less, they're probably a flat character. If I have to take 2 or 3 sentences to describe them, that means that they're probably a well rounded character. All right, last thing that we're going to talk about today in top 10 things that make a character more relatable is standing up for their values. Most people, even if they don't stand up for their values in a verbal way, they might stand up for their values in a different sort of way. Whether it's, hey, I am going to protest this silently, or hey, I'm not going to do that thing and I'm just going to pretend I didn't even notice, or I'm going to quietly stand up for what's right. We still try to stand up for what we believe in, even if it's a soft, quiet resistance, right? And even if we don't stand up for what we believe in, seeing other people stand up for their values makes us feel good because we're like, hey, maybe we can stand up for our values too. It helps inspire us to make greater change in our lives. Um, so seeing a character doing that can be really great. The only thing you want to be careful of with this is realize that when you get your book published, some people are going to like it, some people aren't, because we all have different values, right? And so don't be frustrated when someone's like, ugh, the only part I hated was when she stood up for blah, blah, blah. Well, they can go ahead and hate it. They have different values than you. And that's okay. You need to realize that yes, you can make a character relatable, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to like them. You can do your best to make their character the most relatable person on the planet. And you might still have some people who are like, ugh, they're annoying. Because that's how it works, right? I bet you've had things like that where you and your friends will be talking and you'll be like, I love this character. And everyone else is like, that character? Because we don't always agree. I know I had that. I had this series that I was reading, and I was like, I personally totally ship her with this one guy, and the rest of them were like, gasp! How dare you? I ship the other guy, because they personally felt that his values aligned more with theirs, whereas for me it was the other dude. And so you can have moments like that, and that's okay. In some ways, creating controversy is part of reading. That's why so many books get banned tragically, because people go, I don't like those values. And in some ways that I personally would take it as an honor to have my book banned, because I'd be like, dude, I actually made you think about something hard enough that it bothered you. I made you read it even though you didn't like it. It's kind of the Captain Jack Sparrow thing where he's like, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of. He's like, but you have heard of me. It's okay to give your characters relatability in a way that people don't like. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Just keep in mind that you got to separate your book from yourself. You are a great author, whether or not people like your books. All right. Do you guys have any questions about making a character more relatable to people? If you don't, that's fine. If you do, now's the time. We good? Okay. Then I will turn this off just to recap because a few of you arrived a little late. We have the summer writing contest going on right now. It's for 12 to 17-year-olds, technically older, but none of you look like you're probably older than 17. Um, so I'm going to assume you're in the teen category. And with that, summer coming up and everything, we have our summer contest. It's 3,000 words or less short story, and the prompt is write about an artist discovering something new about their world. It can be any genre you want. They can be any type of artist you want. They can be a rap singer. They can be a dancer. They can be a sculptor. Whatever you want. You don't just have to do the classic art, as in like pencils and paint. Like, if you want to do that, great. But just know, broaden your brush. Know that if you broaden your brush too much, we might dock you like 1 point. But if you're like, yes, he's an artist because he's a serial killer, I might have to go, no, thanks, and back that up a little bit. So don't go too crazy, but also like have fun with it. You can have a gardener that's an artist. Like, you could think of other things outside of the box. Have some fun with it. And they can discover anything new about their world that you want. It can be fantasy, it can be murder mystery, it can be um, historical fiction, whatever you'd like. All right, I'm going to turn off the video now. Yes, question.
You don't have to make like side characters be like perfect people.
Um,
So they get on characters neck or something.
define perfect people.
Like perfect to everyone else except for the character who thinks they're an idiot.
Yes, that's fine, as long as the character's acknowledging that they're not perfect. When I say perfect, I mean everyone thinks they're perfect, they look perfect, they act perfect, they are perfect. That's a problem. But if everyone thinks they're perfect and they're not perfect, for example, with the prissy cheerleader example, if everyone thinks that she's the queen of the school and she's awesome, that's fine, so long as we know that she's secretly not and that she has problems. So, the aura of perfect isn't a problem. The problem is when the character is literally perfect. All right, I'm gonna turn off the video for today. Feel free to ask me any questions that you guys want. Feel free to have me read anything that you guys want. Or feel free to just free write and have some fun writing. I know that today we were going to have a prompt because you guys had mentioned having a writing prompt could be fun. You don't have to write the writing prompt, but if you want to, feel free.